Also, a very joyous New Year to all of you. It is wonderful to be picking this back up again after a brief break during the holidays. This is certainly, as I was mentioning, perhaps in this webinar or at least in the other classes and videos I've been posting, this is a very sacred and wonderful time of the year for going deep. Of course, it is a time of Christmas. I was just informed by somebody recently that the 12 days of Christmas actually start from the Christmas and they go on for 12 days. It's a very holy season when Christ incarnated, and we are also welcoming this new year. And this new year is particularly exciting for a lot of people because of the unique challenges of 2020. So we are all looking forward to joyously welcoming a new season, perhaps eventually putting this pandemic behind us. And certainly what a wonderful way to begin with these spiritual teachings and by going deep within. Today, even before I start, I think I wanted to read something from Whispers from Eternity because it is such an auspicious day and the birthday of Paramhansa Yogananda. I want to start by reading this poem called God's Boatman. Most of you may be aware of this poem. It is a poem written by Paramhansa Yogananda, and it's such a beautiful summary, such a beautiful representation of who he was and the purpose of that particular incarnation of Yogananda, that life that he led and what he brought for all of us. This poem is titled God's Boatman. I want to ply my boat many times across the gulf after death and return to Earth's shores from my home in space. I want to load my boat with all those waiting thirsty ones who have been left behind, that I may carry them to the opalescent pool of iridescent joy. There where my Father distributes his all desire quenching liquid peace. Oh, I will come back again and again, crossing a million crags of suffering. With bleeding feet I will come, if need be, 1,000,000,000 times, as long as I know one stray brother is left behind. I want thee, O God, that I may give thee to all. I want salvation, that I may give it to all. Free me then, O Lord, from the bondage of this body, that I may show others how they too can free themselves. I want thine everlasting happiness, but I want to also share it with others, that all my brothers may find the way to happiness forever and forever in thee. What a beautiful poem. I'll come with bleeding feet, crossing 1,000,000 crags of suffering, if need be 1,000,000,000 times. Master is so beautiful in his expression, his poetic language, and he's speaking the truth. That's the kind of compassion with which these avatars come to this world. They incarnate and they bring these teachings to all of us, and we have to spend each of our days, every moment of our life, in deep gratitude. That is the doorway to our salvation, to be able to tune into these great beings like Yogananda, like Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, and these gurus, and of course all the great avatars in all religions. Moving on to our Gita verse for today, I think after a few weeks on chapter 7, which was quite wonderful and very enlightening, at least for me, I'm moving on to chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita. Let me read the verse for you. I'm going to read the 4th verse of chapter 8, or is the 5th verse of chapter 8. These verses, both in chapter 7 and chapter 8, as we are looking at this section, if you note in the Bhagavad Gita, if I'm right, I don't think Arjuna has a single word. Krishna is answering a lot of questions, and there were a set of questions that Arjuna asked in chapter 6 toward the end, and all these verses that Krishna is sharing with Arjuna are all in response to those questions. He asked, what if I get lost? How will I know what truth is? How will I find you at the time of death? And a few other questions. And all of these responses that Krishna is giving to Arjuna are to those questions, to Arjuna's doubts. And 7th chapter was very interesting. It was the deep wisdom of creation itself and of the different planes. I didn't go through some of the more interesting verses of chapter 7. I do feel like I want to move on to chapter 8 today. But I was thinking maybe in the other webinar that I do on Kriya Yoga, I will cover some of these other verses as well, because Krishna is talking about, looked at the Om vibration and the aspects of creation, but he also goes in detail about the three planes, the material, the astral, and the causal. I'll perhaps talk about it on a different day in a different setting. Now, we are going to look at a very interesting and a beautiful verse of the Gita, which is verse 5 of chapter 8. Let me first read the verse for you. Anta kale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yap prayati samadbhavam yati nasyatra samshayaha. And this is the literal meaning as Swami Kriyananda gives it. He who, at the hour of death, thinks of me only enters unquestioningly into my being. It's a very simple verse. I'm going to read it again. He who, at the hour of death, thinks of me only enters unquestioningly into my being. That's both a reassuring promise and also the entire goal of the spiritual path. It is, of course, very reassuring because Krishna is saying, whatever happens and doesn't happen, whatever seems important doesn't seem important in your life, if at the hour of death, if one is able to unquestioningly, Swami Kriyananda beautifully explains that word with its multiple connotations in this particular verse. Generally, that word that I read in Sanskrit, nissamshayaha, that's how Krishna puts it. It means without doubt or unquestioningly. It is always translated as meaning, of course he will enter my world, he will enter me if he is able to think of me at the time of death. Swami Kriyananda says that word has to be qualified. There are many ways in which you can read that. If one is able to be absorbed in the divine at the moment of death, he unquestioningly enters that realm of God. Also, if he is able to unquestioningly be absorbed in the divine at the time of death. So you can read the various shades of meaning in that word. Now what Krishna is assuring us here, that no matter how the trajectory of life flows, no matter how our karma unfolds in one particular incarnation, the ultimate fruit of all of that is how we are able to hold our consciousness at the moment of death. And this teaching is sometimes taken a bit far. And Swami Kriyananda gives a story. I don't think it's from the scriptures, but it's a traditional story that's shared in India often. It's a story that people commonly know. And I'll share that story with you also. It is a story of somebody who tries to sort of find loopholes in this teaching and enter or have liberation by focusing on the Lord in the final moments of his death. It is said in India that anybody who dies in the holy city of Varanasi or Benares always achieves salvation. And that's why there's always this tradition of people spending their old age in Varanasi, of retiring in Varanasi, because it's said the place is so holy that death cannot touch you. Death cannot pull you down. So if you leave your body in that city of Varanasi, you will attain liberation. Just like Krishna is promising here, if you think of me during the time of death, you will achieve liberation. And there's the story of a dacoit, a robber, who decides that he has sinned all his life, but he doesn't want to carry his sins to the next phase of his incarnational journey. So he moves to the city of Varanasi so that he can die there and he can expiate all his sins and he can be liberated in that incarnation. And not only that, he's concerned that he has too many sins and that he may not be liberated. If something might happen, that might stop him from liberation. So of course, this is not a real story, I don't think so. But as it's said, he cut off his legs so that he cannot leave the city of Varanasi. He can be there for the rest of his life. He's already very old, he's retired. He cut off his legs so that he can die there. One day he's sitting by the banks of the Ganges and he's watching this beautiful horse, somebody riding this beautiful horse. And he sees and he's telling them, oh, you don't know how to ride this horse. This is such a majestic horse. That's not how you hold the horse. That's not how you ride it. That's not how you control its gait. And then he's so frustrated and annoyed at this person who's trying to ride this horse. You with 2 legs are not able to ride this horse well. I can ride this horse even without my legs. And then he asks his friends or whoever is around him to place him on that horse even without his legs, and he wants to show how good he is at riding his horse, and he starts riding this horse. And in the city of Varanasi, it gets its name because, of course, it's on the banks of the Ganges, and there is these 2 rivulets, these small streams called Varuna and Asi. They're 2 rivers that join the Ganges in this particular city. And this holy place, the territory of Varanasi, is defined as that stretch of land that is between the 2 rivers, Varuna and Asi. So where Varuna meets Ganga, the river Ganga, that's where the city of Varanasi begins, and it ends with the Asi Ghat, or the place where the river Asi meets Ganga. So now this man is joyfully riding the horse, gloating with pride and boasting to everybody how good he is at doing that. And suddenly the horse, somehow something gets into the horse and it gets violent, and it starts running wild, and it starts galloping and galloping and galloping, and before he realizes, it crosses the boundary of where Varuna meets Ganges. So it crosses the river and goes on to the other side, and as soon as it goes on to the other side, it throws that man over and it tramples him and he dies there. So ultimately his whole objective of being able to die in Varanasi is defeated, and it might be fair to assume that he was not liberated in that incarnation, and he had to come back again. Now that story is told, and Swami also shares that story, because this teaching is not a loophole. There are no shortcuts in the spiritual path. The only shortcut in the spiritual path is devotion and surrender. That is a shortcut, and that's the shortcut that Krishna is giving to Arjuna. But there is no other shortcut on this plane. There's nothing else we can do. There's no ritual, there's no mantra, there's no going and living in the city. There's no one thing that you can do at the moment of death that will somehow expiate you from all your karmic burden. While I'm sharing stories about Varanasi, there's one more story that is on the similar lines that comes to my mind. It's not a story, it's just a brief exchange. I think it was some famous saint, maybe Vivekananda or somebody like that, who said this, I don't remember, when somebody said, it is told in the scriptures that if you take a plunge in the Ganges, if you go and take a sacred dip in the Ganges, all your sins will be washed away. And is it true that if I just go and take a dip in the Ganges, that I'll be completely cleared of all my sins? And this person, the wise soul, said, yes, it is true. But you know what happens is, before you enter the Ganges, the sins all jump out of your shoulders and they're sitting on the tree. And as soon as you come out of the Ganges, they're all waiting and they'll jump back up again. Now, I don't think it works that way. But again, it is referring to that fact that there's no shortcut. Just because you take a sacred dip in the Ganges, it's not that all our karma, all our lessons that we need to learn are somehow going to be washed away. Well, why do the scriptures say so? Yes, it is possible. No matter what we do, any act of surrender, whether it's completely surrendering to the Lord at the time of death, whether it's taking a dip in the Ganges and truly relinquishing all our attachments, letting go of everything that we are holding to, all our hopes and regrets and longings and desires, if we are able to do that completely, if we are able to use that impetus, if we are able to use the sacred vibration of a place or a river or of this practice of a mantra, of whatever it is, if we are able to tune into the power of that ceremony, tune into the power of that place or that chant, then we can use that as an impetus. You can use the momentum to be able to push yourself through obstacles or challenges which might otherwise be unsurmountable, but at the same time, it is completely reliant on how well we are able to do it and how completely and unquestioningly we are able to do it. As Yoganandaji explains in one of his talks, I don't remember, I think it might have been in one of the collection of talks, the books published by Self-Realization Fellowship. And Swami Kriyananda also talks about it in his writings, where he talks about how karma is created by consistent expression of energy. We create patterns of habits and challenges in our own lives by our past habits, by our past actions. And we have put in a lot of energy in creating them. And in this universe, which is completely defined in terms of energy, energy can be balanced only by equal and opposite energy. That's not just Newton's law on the physical plane, but that's actually an astral law. It is the law of energy. It's how this universe is designed and how it works. So, in order to overcome a challenge, in order to overcome a particular karma, we have to put out an equal and opposing energy. What that means is you don't have to spend 100,000 years putting it out. If you are able to do it with complete focus and complete concentration right at this moment, you can neutralize all of that karma. But the caveat here is that complete commitment with a complete attitude of surrender and giving it all up to God. Without that, it is of course not going to be possible to do that. Now, it might be a little interesting for you to hear all of this talking of death in the final hour in the beginning of the new year. I was thinking about it, and somehow the topic felt really appropriate because this is a time of the year for us to meditate and contemplate on some of these things, not just of death, but of life itself. What Krishna is describing here and what Yoganandaji shares in his commentary is that this moment of death is the defining moment of the incarnation. As somebody wise once told me, from the moment somebody is born, the only certainty in that incarnation is death. There's absolutely no other certainty of how anything else is going to happen in one's life, in your life, in my life. So in that sense, birth and life itself is nothing but a preparation for death. All that we are doing in life is to finally prepare for that exam. And there's no passing or failing in that exam. Of course, no matter how it turns out, we move on. We are moved from that physical body. Divine Mother, out of her compassion and grace, takes us to our next step. And we might have more lessons to learn, and she's going to give us more opportunities. As Ram Prasad, the great Bengali saint poet, described in one of his songs, I was very fascinated when I first learned this song in Bengali. He describes how Kali comes to him as death in all her beauty and all her grace and all her compassion, how that death is an act of compassion. And similarly, I think in the Rubaiyat, or at least in Master's commentary on the Rubaiyat, he talks about how death is the ultimate act of God's love, in the sense that we reach a point in our own incarnational cycle every 80, 90, 100 years, where we reach the limit of the progress that we can make. We get bound by our own karma. We get imprisoned by patterns of our own habits. We get tired. We get exhausted of needing to face the same challenge over and over again. And out of that infinite compassion and love, Divine Mother rescues us every single time. She does not let us suffer in that same body. She rescues us through this instrument of death, and she moves us on to the astral plane. And then if we have to return into another body, she makes that possible, and she creates all these opportunities all over again. Those same difficult relationship, that same financial karma, the same karma with whatever else that we are struggling with. She creates all those opportunities again, so we can do this right one more time. We can have one more opportunity to overcome whatever it is that we are trying to. So in that sense, death is this ultimate act of compassion, and we go through many, many incarnational cycles, because the karma, by the time we reach the point, as Yoganandaji said, by the time we reach the point of embracing a serious spiritual path, he said, if your entire stretch of incarnational cycles, the soul's long journey through space and time, from the moment we left God, if you think of it as a 24-hour day, by the time you're embracing a serious spiritual path, you're in the last few seconds of that cycle. Just think about it. So we already have come a very long journey. That's why we are consciously working on these teachings, consciously trying to expand beyond the limitations of ego consciousness. And here Krishna is reassuring. And what he's reassuring and why this is relevant, I want to bring it back to why I felt that this is a beautiful thought and a beautiful verse to contemplate on as we begin this new year, as we meditate on this auspicious day, because it is a time for us to think and meditate on what is really important. Because essentially what Krishna is saying is so many things that we attach importance to in our own life, all the things that we run behind, all the things that we think we absolutely need, which define our happiness, actually, if you were to think about your own life as that 80, 90-year journey, and ultimately death being the defining moment, if you think of it as preparation for that moment, then all of these equations shift. Somehow the things that didn't seem important now, and the things that seemed important seemed important are no longer as relevant. So that whole perspective shifts. I'm talking to you again in this holy Christmas season, although Christmas is behind us. As I was meditating, I was reminded of the story. I mean, those of you who, of course, are from the West are perhaps more familiar with this, but I grew up in India, and I read this story when I was probably, 11 years old. I don't quite remember. It's a story by Charles Dickens. It's called A Christmas Carol. And it's a very famous tale, and most of you, I'm sure, are aware of it. If not, I would highly recommend. I think it's just a story, it's not a novel. I would recommend you to read this story. It's a beautifully uplifting and spiritual story. It is the story of this old man. His name is Ebenezer Scrooge, and I think it is the eve of Christmas, and he's having these experiences. He is somehow thinking about his own life. He has a sort of a life review. I don't quite remember all the details of how it happens, but he just goes into a reverie. He just has, a subconscious moment, and he's just in a dreamy state, and he enters his own life review, and he watches his own life when he was young, the period of innocence and open-heartedness, when he approached the world with this deep love and receptivity. And then as he became older, how his heart started gradually closing down, and how gathering wealth, taking care of himself, being selfish, all these things started becoming virtues. These things became more important than most other things in life. So as the story is told, he is visited by the ghosts of his own self from the past and from the future. And he's watching all of this, and also he sees what is waiting for him in the future, which is his own funeral. He's ultimately going to leave his body. And then he sees how sad and how depressing that moment would be if he did not change the course of his life. How all the things that he thought were important, all the things that he put his energy into, were in fact not important. And the things like showing compassion, being kind to others, sharing love and kindness, these are all the things that are actually going to make a difference in his life right now. So anyway, I want to share that story with you. I mean, I did not share the entire story, but it's a beautiful episode. It's a beautiful spiritual anecdote for us to contemplate on prioritizing what is important in our own life, prioritizing our inner life, practice of meditation, our service. Our service, it might just be writing a computer program, it might be working in construction, doesn't matter what it is, but our service to God, the attitude with which we serve, trying to bring our focus to all of this, because who knows, you might be 25, I might be 35, somebody might be 70, somebody might be 2 years old, but death could be at your door any time. As Swami Sri Yukteswar says in one of his favorite chants, we don't often chant that chant. Maybe I should have begun with that chant today. It's coming to me right now. The chant where he says, you did not meditate, you did not concentrate. Death will be at thy door, and you may not have time anymore. O my saint, wake yet wake. So let this beautiful new year be a waking call for all of us to wake up in God, to re-establish our resolutions, to focus on our inner life, really think and contemplate about what is important. I just want to share one last thing that's coming to me right now. I think it was something I read in news many months ago, probably 5 months ago or so, when we were in the thick of the pandemic, or at least after 4 or 5 months of the pandemic, maybe late summer. This was an interview with a very famous industrialist in India. He is one of the richest people in India and perhaps one of the richest people in the world. And in this interview, he was saying, let 2020 be the year where We are not thinking about how much money we lost in the stock market, whether the real estate market is going to crash or not. I think he was primarily talking to wealthy people who were stressing a lot more during, these times of crises than even people who didn't have much. So he was talking about, let's not bother about all of that. Let this be the year where we are grateful for the fact that we are healthy, we have all of our family, and some people don't. So many in this world have lost all of that in this particular year. So let's be grateful for all the blessings that we do have, whether it's the presence of the loved ones that are with us today, whether it's the blessings of our friends and family, the blessings of our spiritual path. And for those of us who are drawn to these teachings, who are drawn to Yoganandaji, the gift of the practice of meditation, the gift of the practice of Kriya Yoga, let's be grateful for all of this. And let's not just be grateful, but give them the attention and the priority that they deserve, and let that be the guiding light and the anchor for our life this year and moving forward. So God bless you. I'll see you next week with another verse from the Gita.